Hey everyone, it's Mr.Spooky. If you want to skip this monologue, the time is on screen. First of all, sorry about the small gap in time between the last time I spoke to all of you. I tried to do a whole lot a little too soon after I thought things regarding my health were fixed. Anyway, I decided to just wait a little while longer to give the medicine more time to work, and so far, everything's been good. For the last couple of days, I've been able to read all I want and it sounds great. So I will finish the batch of re-uploads I was planning to get out about 10 days ago. I know I said I would get it all done in one day, but because of how things went, I delayed it. I'm sorry if you hate the re-uploads, these are the last of them. Anyway, a lot of my previously demonetized videos, which I privated, seem to be monetizable now. I really don't know what happened, and I doubt I'll ever get an answer as to how it happened. Maybe they got fixed because they're so old, or maybe because I re-uploaded them. Anyway, I won't be putting a lot of my old videos back up as they were. I will post the same long comment as I did previously, just so anyone who hasn't seen it can. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you soon.
So a few years back, I decided to break my lease and leave town to live in the wilderness. I had been dirtbagging out of my truck for about 3 months and was floating up and down the Blue Ridge Parkway in western North Carolina. I would park at a trailhead and hike in a mile or so, camp a few nights and move on. One night I got startled by a man. He must have been in about his 40s. He took me by surprise but was apologetic, and so I offered him a beer and my fire since it was already dark and kinda cold. I was wary of him though, but I was a big man, 25 years young and 6'2" and about 225 pounds. I wasn't scared of much. I knew I could hold my own if I needed to, and we chatted until late about hunting and trapping. By morning, he was gone. The next night I settled into a new site and I was making dinner, and then the man showed up again. I thought it was odd, but not threatening, and he spent another night hanging out and again was gone by morning. When he showed up on the third site, I started to feel uneasy. That night he tried to kiss me by the fire. I jumped up and he advanced again. I decked him and pinned him down. I told him if he tried anything again, I'd cut his balls off and feed them to him. And he left soon after. I got up early and hiked to the truck, only to find him waiting there. He was asleep in his vehicle, and I snuck away. The next day I parked at a trailhead and watched from the trees as he pulled in behind my truck and started hiking toward where he assumed I was camped. But once he was out of sight, I slashed all 4 of his tires and got the hell out of there. My second year of college was a difficult year. I wish I could say that it was due to organic chemistry or boyfriend drama or anything other than what had actually happened. I started out my year in a great dorm. I loved my hallmates, my room, and the fact that a dining hall was less than 100 feet away. Obviously, I spent a lot of time there, and I got to know the staff. I had worked in a restaurant for 2 years before going to school, and I could identify with the struggles that come along with being a food service worker. Especially because I was at a notoriously snobby school, so I sympathized with the staff, having to deal with rich kids and their entitled bullshit. Most of the staff were lovely people, but one in particular seemed to take a real interest in me. He was a young white man, not much older than myself, named Matt. He always went out of his way to talk to me and ask me questions about myself and how school was going. One evening I was doing homework in the dining hall around closing hours. Matt sat with me and we chatted for a bit. He said he was off work and heading to his car to smoke a bowl before he went home, and asked if I wanted to join. I had only smoked a few times before, but I enjoyed it, and he seemed harmless enough, so I agreed. I was still very much a sheltered child, and to me, he didn't seem like a bad guy, so he couldn't be. We lit up in his car in the parking lot behind the dining hall, and I got a glimpse of the real Matt. He ranted about how his ex-girlfriend had recently dumped him. He called her a bitch and a whore and told me unnecessary details about their, apparently, kinky sex life. The virgin in me was incredibly uncomfortable, only made worse by the paranoia brought on by the weed. He also went on about how much he hated the students at my university, especially the girls, saying they treated him as less than human. I was completely speechless and I didn't know how to respond. He tried to apologize for going off, saying that I was different and that he wanted to get to know me better. I remember blurting out that I needed to go and I got the hell out of Dodge. He got out too and shouted after me to come back, and I thought he might have chased me, but he didn't, and I got back to my room safely. I avoided that dining hall like the plague for the next week, and I didn't see him again until one night that still haunts me to this day. Around midnight, I was walking back to my dorm alone from a function at the Christian Center, which was only about 2 blocks away. I know walking by myself was stupid, but the buses weren't working, and I felt bad asking someone to walk with me because there were some steep inclines between my center and the dorm. I was walking along an empty residential street that was just around the corner from my dorm when I noticed a black SUV that was creeping along behind me. It was going so slow that it was very hard to notice. At first, I tried not to panic, but it quickly clicked that it was the same car as Matt's. I started to run when it sped up ahead of me, and a man in a ski mask jumped out at me. I just knew it was Matt. From here, things happened very fast. I tried to run the other way, but he grabbed me from behind and was struggling to get my wrist into handcuffs while simultaneously pulling me towards his car. I was screaming at the top of my lungs and fighting like hell. We fought each other for a few minutes like that before he dropped the handcuffs and I was able to slam my heel into his foot. I thought those two things and my relentless struggling shook his confidence because he ran back to his car and sped off. Freaked out, I ran back to the car, constantly looking back to see if he was after me. Thankfully, he didn't follow, and I was able to call the police. I was very lucky that night, not only because I got away, but because he was also caught shortly after I had called 911. He was arrested and the police searched his car. They found handcuffs, duct tape, and a knife. During interrogation, he confessed that he was bitter and depressed over his breakup and wanted to make someone feel pain like he felt it. Nearly a year later, after a painful testimony from me, he was convicted to 40 years in prison with a 32-year suspension for abduction and intent to defile. Matt, let's never meet again. Hey, before I start the story, I just wanted to say, if you ever see someone getting bullied or picked on, don't leave them alone. Stand up for them. Just say something, anything, to a teacher or a parent. Help them, because they're obviously going through something worse than you think. And I just want to say, never, ever commit suicide. It's just not the answer. I don't know, I don't want to get too deep into it. Let's get into the story. I'm 27 now. This story took place during my freshman year of high school, so I was about 14 at the time. School has never been a good experience for me. From preschool to college, it's just never been a positive experience. My freshman year of high school, though, was an all-time low. It is by far the worst year of my life to date. I was a pretty awkward kid. I was too thin, completely uncomfortable in my own skin. I had basically no true friends, and to guys, I was seemingly invisible. All of this made me an easy target. Within the first month of school, I was targeted by a pack of bullies. I wasn't just targeted by students either. I was also targeted by teachers, and to add to that, and adding that I had problems with my father, it wasn't a stretch to lead me to self-harm. By winter break, I was being encouraged to kill myself. I hated myself, but fortunately, it wasn't enough to make me give in. I also didn't see that the person that relentlessly targeted me was my own sister. My insecurities were played to and manipulated to make me feel small and insignificant as possible. My sister loved to humiliate me as publicly as possible. There was also one guy in particular that took joy in targeting me. By the spring term, I was not only being harassed at school, but also online by classmates and at home by my family. This one particular guy though, he was a special kind of fucked up. He kept this diary and on some of the pages he would cut himself and write down on his blood. This one particular guy though, he was a special kind of fucked up. He kept this diary and on some pages he would cut himself and write it in his own blood. He even carried it to school on a regular basis. This guy in particular was insistent that I kill myself. Towards the end of the year, when it became apparent that I wasn't going to, he began to threaten to kill me himself. By this point it's the last few weeks of school, and I had a chat log of his threats. Finally having enough, I took the chat log to my guidance counselor who quite literally laughed in my face and told me that we just didn't like each other and nothing was going to happen. This wasn't many years after the Columbine shootings, and the terror is still kind of fresh, and yet she just laughed at me. In the chat log, he specifically said that on the last day of school, he was going to bring a gun and shoot me, and the counselor just laughed in my face. After that incident, I finally said something to my parents, and my mother went to the school and flipped her shit at everyone, including the teachers that were telling my classmates how worthless and stupid I was because I was always late and never did my work. Then she pulled me out of the school. She should have gotten a lawyer, but she doesn't think that way. Not long after graduation, the creepy dude that wrote in his own blood friend requested me on Facebook. Obviously, I declined, and about the same time, I cut ties with my sister and haven't spoken to her in almost 10 years. Creepy jerk that wanted to kill me and shitty older sister? Let's never meet again. Ever. I was helping my dad clean out the storage room last weekend, and while he was stacking boxes on the other side of the room, I was skimming through some of his old things like old fishing rods we used to take with us to his favorite lake when I was younger. Photographs of my grandpa that I never had a chance to meet, but was told that he was a very arrogant man. Then I came across this plastic trash bag that was full of different sized teddy bears. Some even looked as if they were bought at a CVS on Valentine's Day, because there was this heart that read, "I love you" in cursive, writing that was stitched into the hands of the stuffed animal. I was curious as to why my dad was holding on to all of these, and he said, "I should have thrown those out a long time ago. I was never even friends with that creepy man." Reminiscing my childhood was strange and adventurous simultaneously, so it took me a few silent moments to finally realize what my dad was talking about. Creepy man? Oh right, the one with the thin silver frames, sandy colored hair, and that had a gray texture. Sort of looked like Alton Brown from Food Network, but just a lot more discomforting and sleep deprived. I've encountered this man about 3 times when I was 7 years old. I used to live in an apartment complex with my dad and stepmom. I spent half of my childhood living there and remembered how our neighbors upstairs would make such a racket. And my parents would often complain about how thin the walls were. I can't recall this creepy man's name though, but I'm very observant, so the details on his appearance came almost instantly to me. He used to knock on the door to my apartment and deliver teddy bears without uttering a word. My dad would open the door with a confused but polite look on his face and greet him, but the man only smiled as sweetly and eerily as he possibly could, never showing any teeth, and handed the bear to my dad. I'd always be hiding behind the couch whenever he stopped by because his visits made me feel very uneasy. The man would then peek behind my dad's shoulder, scanning the living room to find me, and then he'd wave and smile until his cheekbones squished his eyes together. I was always too nervous to do anything but stand there and stare at him until my dad finally shut the door and gave me a concerned look. The second time that creepy man knocked on the door, he just smiled at my dad again and handed him a piece of paper, then simply waved to me and walked back upstairs to his apartment. My dad never told me what the piece of paper said. He read it silently to himself, then ripped it up and threw it away. I never thought to ask about it for some reason. The last time he stopped by, a trash bag with teddy bears was accompanying him. He did the regular smile and wave routine, but blew me a kiss this time, ignoring my dad's uncomfortable facial expression. I never saw him again after that. I guess 3rd time's a charm. Anyways, let's never meet again. About 4 or 5 months ago, I had a cup of coffee before going to bed at around 9 p.m. Now, normally the coffee does nothing as far as keeping me awake, but on this particular night, however, I did not get one bit of sleep. All throughout the night, I was on my phone as I usually am before going to bed, when I realized it was almost 4 a.m. and I didn't feel the least bit sleepy or tired. I started to hear what sounded like shuffling outside my window, which was about 4 feet across from my bed. Before I continue, I should mention that there are 2 windows to my room, which happen to be facing the street. I live in one of those, so my room is easily accessible to anyone who would be walking by. That's if they knew the layout of my house though. I had heard on the news earlier that day that it would rain overnight, so I opened up my weather app and sure enough, it said it was raining. The noise kept on for about 5 minutes or so, but I was so sure it was the rain that I didn't bother to get up and see what it actually was. Suddenly, I heard a thud on my window. Extremely startled, the only thing I could think of doing was turning on the flashlight from my phone and pointing at the window. The noises stopped, almost magically. I sent my brother a text to ask if he was home, thinking maybe he could have been just trying to prank me or scare me. He said he wasn't, so I had told him that I heard a noise outside my window and suggested he keep his eyes open when getting home. When I woke up that morning, I told my mom about it, and she thought it would be a good idea to call my dad and tell him. I don't know why, considering there wasn't much he could do from work. That evening my dad got home from work and he walked over to my window, and sure enough, there in the dried up mud was a set of footprints that were big enough to belong to a petty hefty sized man. It also looked like he was trying to take off my screen to the window, which I'm pretty sure was the thud I had heard. Creepy man trying to come into my room at 4 a.m.? Let's never meet.